A gavel slammed down, the sound echoing the end of a career. On one side of the courtroom, a judge sat, his expression unwavering. On the other, a lawyer stood, her face a mask of disbelief and horror. Just moments before, she had been at the peak of her profession, confident and in control. Now her world was collapsing, all because of a single arrogant mistake. She had walked into that waiting room thinking she was untouchable. She had looked down on a man, judging him by his appearance and his accent. She had humiliated him, dismissing him as insignificant. She never imagined that this seemingly unimportant encounter would be the biggest mistake of her life. What she didn't know was that this man held her entire future in his hands. Her arrogance, her prejudice, had blinded her. And now, she was about to pay the ultimate price. The story was about to unfold, revealing a shocking twist that no one, least of all this lawyer, saw coming. It was a story of power, of prejudice, and of the devastating consequences of underestimating the wrong person. Amelia Hayes was the kind of lawyer other lawyers whispered about. Not always in admiration, but certainly with a degree of awe and maybe a little fear. She worked at one of the top law firms in the city, the kind of place where the carpets were thick, the offices were huge, and the expectations were even bigger. Amelia didn't just meet those expectations, she crushed them. She was known for her sharp mind, her even sharper tongue, and her designer suits that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Amelia specialized in corporate law, the kind of high-stakes legal battles where millions of dollars were on the line. She wasn't interested in helping the little guy. Amelia was interested in winning, and she was very, very good at it. Her secret? She was ruthless. She prepared meticulously, she argued fiercely, and she had absolutely no patience for anyone she considered incompetent, weak, or, in her private thoughts, simply beneath her. This particular case was a big one, even for Amelia. A major corporation was facing a complex immigration issue involving several key employees. Their visas were in jeopardy, and if they were deported, the company stood to lose a fortune. Amelia had been hired to make the problem go away, and she intended to do just that. She'd spent weeks poring over documents, crafting her arguments, and preparing for the preliminary hearing. She was confident, bordering on arrogant. In her mind, there was no way she could lose. She saw herself as a force of nature, a legal titan, and anyone who got in her way was about to get flattened. This attitude, this unshakable belief in her own superiority, was about to lead her down a path of destruction. It all started with a simple trip to the immigration court. The waiting room of the immigration court was a stark contrast to Amelia's sleek, modern office. It was functional, but not exactly welcoming. Rows of plastic chairs lined the walls, most of them occupied. People from all walks of life sat anxiously, clutching folders and documents, their faces etched with worry and uncertainty. The air hummed with a low thrum of nervous energy. Amelia swept into the room, her expensive heels clicking on the linoleum floor. She scanned the area, her expression a mixture of impatience and disdain. She needed to review some crucial notes before the hearing, but there wasn't a single empty seat, except, that is, for one next to a man quietly reading a book. He looked ordinary, unassuming. He wore a simple, slightly worn button-down shirt and jeans. His hair was neatly combed, but his clothes suggested he wasn't someone accustomed to the world of high-powered lawyers and corporate boardrooms. He spoke with a noticeable accent, one Amelia couldn't immediately place, but it was enough to trigger her internal biases. Amelia approached him without a hint of politeness. "Excuse me," she said, her tone sharp and demanding. "Do you mind? I need this seat." The man looked up, startled by her abruptness. "Oh, I'm sorry," he replied, his voice calm and measured, the accent clear but not heavy. "I didn't realize—" Amelia cut him off before he could finish. "Just move. Quickly, I have important things to do." She didn't wait for him to gather his belongings. She practically snatched the seat, spreading her files out on the small table with an aggressive flourish. The man quietly moved to stand against the wall, his book still in hand. He didn't protest, didn't argue. He simply observed her with a quiet intensity that Amelia completely missed. She huffed softly, muttering under her breath, but loud enough for him to hear. "Unbelievable. Some people—" She pointedly ignored him, immersing herself in her documents, as if he were nothing more than a minor inconvenience, an obstacle to be overcome. He, on the other hand, watched her. Not with anger, not with resentment, but with a kind of quiet observation. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, a hint of sadness perhaps, or maybe just disappointment. He saw her arrogance, her impatience, her utter lack of respect. He saw it all, and he said nothing. He simply waited, his presence a silent, unnoticed counterpoint to Amelia's self-importance. The seed of her downfall had been planted, and she hadn't even noticed the first sprout. The courtroom was a world away from the chaotic waiting room. It was a place of order, of formality, of power. The high ceilings, the polished wood, the imposing judge's bench, everything was designed to convey authority. Amelia felt a surge of confidence as she entered, her earlier irritation forgotten. This was her domain. She approached the lawyer's table, her steps purposeful, her expression composed. She glanced at the opposing counsel, a young man who looked visibly nervous. He was fresh out of law school, clearly intimidated by the setting, and even more so by Amelia herself. She allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smirk. This was going to be easier than she thought. Amelia arranged her files, her movements precise and efficient. She was ready. She'd rehearsed her opening statement, anticipated every possible objection, and prepared her counter-arguments. She was a predator, and this courtroom was her hunting ground. The bailiff's voice boomed through the room, silencing the low murmur of conversation. "All rise!" Everyone stood, their attention fixed on the doors at the back of the courtroom. Amelia straightened her jacket, a flicker of anticipation in her eyes. This was it, the moment of truth. The doors swung open and a figure entered, but it wasn't the judge Amelia expected. It was him, the man from the waiting room, the man she had dismissed, belittled, and treated with such utter contempt. He was no longer wearing the simple clothes. He was now adorned in the flowing black robes of a judge. The world seemed to tilt on its axis for Amelia. Her breath caught in her throat. Her carefully constructed composure shattered into a million pieces. The blood drained from her face, leaving her pale and trembling. Her eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed in a desperate attempt to deny what she was seeing. The bailiff continued, his voice echoing the growing horror in Amelia's mind. "The Honorable Judge Rafael Ramirez presiding. Judge Ramirez. Judge." The word reverberated through the courtroom, each syllable a hammer blow to Amelia's carefully constructed reality. He walked with a quiet dignity, his gaze sweeping across the room, finally settling on Amelia. There was no anger in his expression, no hint of gloating, just a calm, unwavering look that seemed to pierce through her facade of confidence, exposing the raw fear beneath. The color had completely left of Amelia's face. Her polished exterior was gone. The confident lawyer had vanished, replaced by a woman on the verge of a complete breakdown. The courtroom, once her arena of triumph, had become a cage, trapping her in the consequences of her own arrogance. The huntress had become the hunted, and she knew, with a sickening certainty, that her career, her reputation, everything she had worked for, was about to be destroyed. The hearing began, but it was nothing like Amelia had envisioned. The confidence she had felt just moments before had evaporated, replaced by a gnawing sense of dread. Her carefully prepared opening statement, usually delivered with flawless precision, faltered. She stumbled over words, lost her train of thought, and felt the heat of 100 pairs of eyes burning into her. Judge Ramirez, for his part, remained impeccably professional. He listened patiently, his expression unreadable, but there was a subtle shift in his demeanor. It wasn't overt hostility, but a distinct lack of the deference judges often show to experienced lawyers like Amelia. He was treating her like any other attorney, holding her to the strict letter of the law, and that, in itself, was a form of punishment. "Ms. Hayes," he said, his voice calm but firm after she made a particularly weak objection, "I suggest you familiarize yourself with the relevant case law before making such baseless claims." His accent, the very thing she had mocked earlier, now seemed to carry an added weight, an authority that amplified her humiliation. Amelia's hands trembled as she shuffled through her notes. She, who usually had every detail at her fingertips, was lost. She tried to regain her composure, to salvage the situation, but it was like trying to build a sandcastle against a rising tide. The young, inexperienced lawyer representing the opposing side seemed to grow in confidence with each passing moment. He watched Amelia's unraveling with a mixture of disbelief and quiet satisfaction. He presented his arguments clearly and concisely, and Judge Ramirez listened attentively, nodding occasionally in agreement. Amelia attempted to cross-examine the opposing witnesses, but her usual aggressive tactics backfired. She came across as desperate and flustered, her questions rambling and unfocused. Judge Ramirez intervened several times, reminding her of proper courtroom procedure, his tone growing increasingly sharp. "Ms. Hayes," he said, his voice laced with a hint of steel, "I will not tolerate this line of questioning. It is irrelevant and frankly disrespectful to the witness." Each reprimand, each overruled objection, was a blow to Amelia's ego, a chipping away at her carefully constructed facade of invincibility. The courtroom, once her sanctuary, had become a torture chamber. She could feel the whispers, the stares, the silent judgment of everyone present. She was losing, and she knew it. And worse, she knew why she was losing. It wasn't just the judge's impartiality. It was the weight of her own conscience, the realization that her arrogance had finally caught up with her. The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Every exchange between Amelia and Judge Ramirez was loaded with unspoken meaning, a silent battle of wills playing out beneath the surface of legal procedure. Flashbacks of the waiting room scene replayed on repeat in her head. She replayed his calm, steady demeanor and contrasted it with her own arrogance. She was a mess. She looked like she was about to break. She looked as if she wanted to disappear. The closing arguments were a formality. Amelia, drained and defeated, barely managed to string together a coherent sentence. The opposing lawyer, emboldened by her collapse, delivered a concise and persuasive summary of his case. The jury was dismissed. Then they returned. The courtroom was silent, thick with anticipation. Everyone waited. The jury delivered their verdict quickly. It wasn't even close. The foreperson stood, cleared their throat, and announced, "We find in favor of the defendant." The words hit Amelia like a physical blow. She flinched, her body swaying slightly. Her client, the CEO of the corporation, shot her a look of pure fury, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. Millions of dollars, years of planning, all gone in an instant. Judge Ramirez, his expression still composed, addressed the court. "This court finds in favor of the defendant, as the jury has stated. The case is dismissed." He paused, his gaze settling on Amelia. "Ms. Hayes," he said, his voice carrying a weight that transcended the legal proceedings, "I suggest you take some time to reflect on your conduct, both in this courtroom and outside of it. Prejudice, arrogance, and a disregard for basic human decency have no place in the pursuit of justice. The legal profession demands integrity and respect, not just for the law, but for every individual, regardless of their background or circumstances." His words were not a lecture, they were a condemnation. They echoed through the silent courtroom, sealing Amelia's fate. She stood there, frozen, the weight of her failure crushing her. Her career, her reputation, her carefully constructed world lay in ruins at her feet. The immediate consequences were clear: a lost case, an enraged client, and the looming specter of professional disgrace. The gavel fell, a final definitive sound that marked the end of one chapter and the uncertain beginning of another. The aftermath of the disastrous hearing was swift and brutal. News of Amelia's humiliating defeat, fueled by whispers of her unprofessional conduct, spread through the legal community like wildfire. Headlines in legal blogs and industry publications screamed about the fall of a legal titan and the stunning upset in the high-profile immigration case. Within hours, Amelia was summoned to a meeting with the senior partners at her firm. The atmosphere was icy, the faces grim. The conversation was short and to the point. She was fired. Her keys were confiscated, her access card deactivated, and she was escorted from the building, a cardboard box containing her personal belongings, the only tangible remnant of her once glittering career. The whispers followed her. Colleagues she had once considered friends avoided her gaze. Recruiters stopped returning her calls. The doors that had once opened so easily were now slammed shut. She was persona non grata in the legal world, a pariah tainted by the stench of failure and the even more damaging stain of prejudice. But the consequences didn't end with her professional demise. Word of her behavior in the waiting room, her blatant disrespect for the man who turned out to be Judge Ramirez, had reached the ears of a tenacious investigative reporter named Sarah Chen. Chen, known for her relentless pursuit of justice and her focus on exposing systemic bias, saw in Amelia's story a pattern, a thread that connected to a larger narrative of privilege and abuse of power. Chen began digging, meticulously piecing together Amelia's past. She interviewed former colleagues, disgruntled clients, and even court staff who had witnessed Amelia's behavior over the years. A disturbing picture began to emerge. It wasn't just a single incident of rudeness. It was a consistent pattern of condescension, discrimination, and a willingness to bend the rules to her advantage. Former interns spoke of Amelia's demeaning comments and her habit of assigning menial tasks to anyone she deemed unworthy. Clients recalled her dismissive attitude towards their concerns, especially if they were from marginalized communities. Court clerks recounted instances where she had used her influence to intimidate them or to gain unfair advantages in her cases. The investigation revealed a lawyer who had built her career not just on skill, but on a foundation of arrogance and a blatant disregard for the principles of fairness and equality. The waiting room incident, Chen realized, was not an aberration. It was a microcosm of Amelia's entire professional life. The reporter was building a strong case, and it wouldn't be long. Judge Ramirez, back in his chambers, looked out the window at the city sprawling below. The case was closed, the verdict delivered, but the weight of it lingered. He had seen Arrogance and Prejudice in his courtroom before, but Amelia Hayes' case was a particularly stark reminder of the insidious ways power could corrupt. He thought about the waiting room, about the quiet dignity of the people who came to his court seeking justice, often with their lives hanging in the balance. They deserved respect, regardless of their accents, their clothes, or their social standing. He knew that one case, one verdict, wouldn't change the world. But it could be a start. It could be a reminder that the law was meant to be a shield for the vulnerable, not a weapon for the powerful. It could be a lesson, not just for Amelia Hayes, but for everyone who believed that their status or privilege placed them above the basic rules of human decency. Amelia's story is a cautionary tale, a stark illustration of how quickly and completely a life built on arrogance could crumble. It is a reminder that true strength lay not in belittling others, but in treating everyone with fairness and respect. It is a testament to the enduring power of simple human dignity, the kind that couldn't be bought or sold, the kind that shone through even in the most unassuming of circumstances. And in the end, it is a reaffirmation that justice, though sometimes delayed, ultimately finds its way. The scales might be tipped, the playing field uneven, but the pursuit of what is right, of what is fair, must always continue. Please remember to share, like, and subscribe to this channel. Also, don't forget to turn on post notifications to be among the first to watch our videos. See you in the next video.